Hello all and welcome back to Finominal UK for another portfolio review. So a highly requested piece of analysis today looking at Stephen Yu's very popular Blue Whale Growth Fund. So as we can see from the fact sheet, 1.8 billion of AUM. And just a note on the OCF for this fund, we can see OCF starting at 0.82% and going up to 1.57%. This analysis will be based off of the accumulation share class with an OCF of 1.07%, as I believe that's to be the share class most advisors and clients would most likely be looking at. Okay. Just a note on holdings as well, we can see this is a very concentrated portfolio with 33 holdings currently. And to note on the benchmark selection, we can see the fund managers used the IA Global for their fact sheet. We won't be using that for our analysis just because that's comparing the Blue Whale just against other peers within the industry. So instead, we're going to be taking a look at the Blue Whale Growth Fund against the Nasdaq 100 due to it having a US tech tilt, as well as the MSCI World in general, and we'll also look at a composite blend of both of those. So without further ado, let's head over to the asset comparer within Finominal. So as we can see, I've loaded in these portfolios, the Blue Whale Growth Fund, Nasdaq 100 and MSCI World, and then I've created that composite portfolio I mentioned using the tickers EQQQ for the Nasdaq 100 and SWDA for the MSCI World Index. So let's look towards cumulative returns, where overall we can see the Blue Whale Growth Fund has outperformed the MSCI World, underperformed the Nasdaq 100, and has been quite similar, is what I would say, to that composite portfolio we made, where from 2022 we actually saw that composite portfolio see higher outperformance, though in very recent times, last couple of months since the start of the year, we've actually seen the Blue Whale Growth Fund's cumulative returns uptick above that composite portfolio we created. Let's scroll down now and let's have a look at risk versus return, where if we look, we can see the lowest volatility portfolio was the one we created, having 19.05% volatility for that composite we created. We compare that against the Blue Whale Growth Fund. We saw higher volatility at 22.26%, though we did see a higher CAGR at near, well, it says there 16.87% versus the composite we created of 15.5%. Let's continue now to portfolio stress testing and drawdowns, where we can see the blue line of WS Blue Whale Growth Fund has seen much higher drawdowns than all the other assets shown, so that composite we created as well as the Nasdaq and the MSCI World, though that is to be expected, I would say, due to this portfolio having a concentrated level of holdings. If we wanted to, we can also replicate these returns to see how this particular portfolio would look back for portfolios with shorter returns history, but I think this gives a clear enough picture from the actual drawdowns perspective where we can see the Blue Whale Growth Fund having that heightened level of drawdown. Moving forward to fundamentals, these are 100% equity portfolios to note, but let's look at breakdown by top 10 markets, where we can see WS Blue Whale Growth Fund has a 75% allocation in the US, which is comparable to that of the Nasdaq with 94% US allocation and the MSCI World having a 70% allocation. The composite portfolio we created having an 82% allocation towards the US. And if we compare other regions in which Blue Whale Growth Funds invest in, we can see 8% in Taiwan, 5% in Italy, 5% in Germany, 3% in Japan, and 2% split within the UK and France, so 2% in each, let's say. It's quite interesting to note such a little amount within the UK for a fund that is in the UK. It's something I think is worth noting anyway. And let's look to break down by sectors now, where we can see the Nasdaq has a higher allocation to information tech, much more than MSCI World. So 70% information tech allocation to Nasdaq 100 and a 37% information tech allocation to the within MSCI World. Compare that against Blue Whale Growth Fund at 55%. I think the composite we made is quite comparable, is what I would say, nearly bang on at 54%. And then we compare that against the other sectors that's shown here as well. Quite comfortable with that composite we created, is what I would say on that. Let's move over now to factor betas, where if we compare the Blue Whale Growth Fund with Nasdaq 100, we can actually see they've both got a minus 0.3 value factor beta and minus 0.2 low volatility factor beta. So again, I think that's worth noting just to show how comparable those two assets are. Okay. Now to conclude, let's have a look at the statistics tab, where we can see the composite benchmark we made 50% EQQQ, 50% SWDA. We did see a CAGR of 15.5%, which is quite close, I'm going to say, to the Blue Whale Growth Fund of 16.87%. And we've done this with lower volatility and thus giving us a higher Sharpe ratio for that composite we created of 0.68 Sharpe. We compare that against the Blue Whale's Sharpe ratio of 0.64. And if we also look at max drawdown as well, we can see the max drawdown of the composite we created at minus 30.91% versus the Blue Whale Growth at minus 45.12%. And that's also been the highest max drawdown out of all assets we're seeing here. So to conclude on this piece of analysis, overall we've got it's a very active, highly concentrated portfolio, which if we compare just off the IA Global benchmark looks phenomenal. But then we see this against a composite benchmark, which is also much cheaper in regards to fees, 0.25% versus 1.07% for the Blue Whale Growth Fund. It's certainly something to note, is what I would say. Another piece of information to note, we've now launched portfolio fact sheets. So if you did want to see a portfolio, say 50% EQQQ, 50% SWDA, you can create that within your portfolio within Finominal just by writing in those two tickers and putting in those two weights. And then you can we've got an AI summary where that can give a neutral tone or a marketing tone, and you can include holdings level analysis. And what's nice about that is once created, I'll show you the output of that, where you can see a nice portfolio fact sheet of your portfolio. So yeah, it's certainly worth noting should anyone want to have a look at this after reviewing. But other than that, that is all from me for this piece of analysis. So I do hope that was helpful and informative as always. But other than that, please do like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks all.